Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to Impi, your friendly catamaran. Now, folks, this is a technical video. It's not going to appeal to everybody. I've been asked on numerous occasions to please refer to the video where we shared how we got rid of our raw water pump on our Onan generator. So I've decided just to put together a technical video showing exactly what we have done to get this feature on our boat. Okay, so many people asking me questions who know what we've done here. Now, how does one go about sharing information with so many aspects to it? And then again, for those who are practically minded with mechanical knowledge, when is it just too much sharing? So I've tried in this video to find a kind of middle way. For those who have the technical knowledge and are just looking for the nuts and bolts of the swap over between pumps, well, if you don't mind, please just fast forward through the sections to the relevant information you're looking for. For many cruising sailors, it is necessary to provide some background basics along the way for a better understanding of this. So please bear with me, folks. This is not a well-edited video that would take too long. My intention here is to enable you to enable yourself just to provide the information where you never have to replace a rubber impeller to your raw water pump ever again. Well, hopefully along the way you will also get to see some other ideas on how to simplify your lives around the raw water system.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might wanna sing it note for note. Don't worry.
So for those who are newbies to this, let me share some of the very basics around freshwater and saltwater. Saltwater, which we refer to here as raw water because Impi is on the sea, it's saltwater, and how this keeps a generator within its operational temperature limits. Now, guys, ignore my art skills. I know I draw really well, so no reason to pat me on the back for it. So here we have an ocean. Let's draw an ocean. See, I drew that really well. Now, let's put a catamaran on this ocean. Oh boy, I can just hear the monohull guys complaining already. Well, let's make it a cross-section of a catamaran. And hey, let's drop a nice heavy Onan generator onto this thing. Lagoons can handle the weight. And now for all those salty dogs, let's annoy them by first discussing the freshwater reticulation system. So let's go ahead with the freshwater and put in a reservoir or an expansion tank. Now let's throw in the freshwater pump, which is driven by our fan belt on the Onan. And also check out the cooler, which carries both freshwater and saltwater or raw water through it. Now for the forgetful ones, let's just remember before continuing on that there is a freshwater system and a raw or saltwater system here. Well, the freshwater system is a self-contained or closed circuit system, and this means that the water circulates through the system continuously, much like in one's motor vehicle. Well, on a motor vehicle, one gets a radiator tank, usually two, one on top and one below, and the tubes between the two are what keeps the descending water cool as a fan blows cool air through them. Well, now on our marine generator, we have a tank and no fan to cool it.
In every life we have some trouble. When you worry, you make it double. Don't worry.
Right, so the fresh water circulates to keep the engine cool, but of course the heat needs to be removed from the recycling water, so the water re-enters the engine block already cooled. And the way they achieve this is to pass the fresh water through a cooler, the very same cooler through which raw water will pass. Now, raw water flows in what we refer to as open circuit. This means that water is pumped through a system and the entering water is exhausted from that system. It does not recycle. And the way they do this is to draw it out of the ocean and push it back into the ocean. Okay, so transferring heat from the fresh water to ocean water happens within the cooler. Perhaps we can quickly look at this. So here we have a cooler. You can see it's a housing and it has these tubes going through it, which I've drawn in red here. So the engine block has transferred heat to the fresh water system, and this water enters the housing of the cooler, passing through the cooler and around these tubes drawn in red. Well, cooler water out of the ocean, or raw water, is being sucked up out of the ocean by the raw water pump, and it enters the red tubes drawn here, passing through these red tubes to the other side of the cooler. Now the magic happens inside the cooler, since heat is transferred from the warmed fresh water to the cooled ocean water as it passes through. Therefore the fresh water returns to the system cooled, and this is a repetitive and continuous action. Now the heated raw water or seawater has taken on the heat of the fresh water and returns it to the ocean.
Don't worry. Be happy.
Right, so here is our cooler again, and what I've done is I've actually taken this end cap off. So what happens is water flows up through the pumping mechanism in your generator. Well, we've changed that. I've done a video on that before, how we've changed that. But you get salt water is being lifted out of the ocean, pushed up and through this cooler here, and basically spat back out into the ocean through this side. And that raw water or seawater, I'm just going to get my flashlight here, basically travels through those little tubes that you see there. So one needs to make sure that they are always clean, right? Those little tubes there. And basically your fresh water flows on the outer side, so it fills up this chamber here, and there you can see those tubes from this side. Your fresh water would basically be sitting around here. Your salt water is basically transferring heat from your fresh water through these tubes, through the circulation, the temperature of the ocean. The fresh water is being cooled as heat is dissipated from fresh water to raw water. I hope that makes sense. Over here we have the raw water, this is your raw water flow sensor. So that will sense if you've got any raw water flow issues. Raw water being water sucked up from the ocean. Salt water. Well, I hope that by using some real footage in the sketches, it makes more sense. So here we have the generator. The raw water pump is sucking up raw water out of the ocean. It's passing through the cooler and spitting it back into the ocean. Now the raw water pump has an impeller inside it. This is the devil in the system. It has little rubber fins on it. We all know about it, and we keep replacing the impeller. It does not last, and the trouble more so with these broken fins is that they end up in the cooler housing, blocking off those little tubes which I just showed you. So with all this in mind, let's see how our system is rigged on Impi. So we have a stopcock fitting through which ocean water will enter and is carried through a pipe to the strainer. Now the strainer makes sure that no large items like seaweed, plastic or anything like that can pass through to the pump, which would then damage the impeller. The water flows through a siphon brake system. Some call this a rising vent, others call it by various different descriptions. Well, on top of the siphon brake or rising vent is a vent that, when the engine is turned off, breaks the siphon effect of water flow. Well, this vent also acts as a bleed valve to release trapped air or air trapped inside, which otherwise would result in a continued airlock and unable to work its way through the system. Well, I don't like the way this fitting is installed, since when bleeding air from the system here, salt water enters the cabinet. I will show you how we took care of this. Well, now the water is sucked up by the pump and is expelled back to the ocean via the exhaust. Intro to this movie gave us a bit of a boat tour. Here we are in the master bedroom under the floorboards where the raw water intake is located for our Onan generator. Right, so here we are. I've come to our bedroom in Impi, and we've removed the floorboard here. Now you will see 3 March pumps here. 1, 2, 3. These 2 over here actually feed the air conditioners, and this particular one here is the one that works with the generator. Okay, before we go on, let me just quickly show the type of pump that we have gone for here. One needs to check the flow rates and the specifications to make sure that the pump matches the flow rate of your generator. Well, in this case, it certainly matches ours. So take a look at those specs before you replace. These 3 filter housings over here work with each pump individually, and these 2 are for the air conditioner, and this particular one here is for the generator. So the way this works is that water comes up from the ocean, through the stopcock, which can switch, you can close it or open it, through a non-return valve over here. Now that non-return valve prevents water from flowing back to the ocean. So it's important to keep the inside of that valve clean so that the rubbers seat properly. And that will prevent air getting into the system and the need for bleeding the water each time. It can be a pain. So the water basically travels through this line into the filter housing, prevents any big objects from damaging the pump or getting up to the coolers in the generator. The water flows down back through this line and into the input of the March pump here. So that's the intake. This has an impeller inside, which is actually a magnetic impeller, which is terrific. So no shafts are attached to that. And in all the time we've been running our generator, we haven't lost an impeller yet. This is the outlet of the pump, and basically that goes into the line that was plumbed into the boat for the raw water system on the generator. Okay, so you'll notice here is a cable. That is AC. It's 220 volts. It's not 12 volts. It's 220 volts. So that wire is wired directly to the output of the generator itself. Now that's important, because if one wires that through an inverter or something like that, this pump could run and cause water to flow into a generator that's not running basically, and that could result in water on the pistons. So very importantly, one needs to wire the pump directly to the output on the generator side. This means when the generator is switched on, the pump automatically comes to life, and when the generator is switched off, it automatically is killed. So there we have it. It's as simple as that. It works very well. We're very pleased we did this mod, and as I say, it's helped us. It's done well for a few years now. Right, so Anna's going to start the generator for us. Okay, love, you can. And there we go. Now the water is running. As you can see, that water is running, and that is this pump now that is turning here. The other nice thing is that this is there's no impeller in here that is attached to a shaft. This is actually a magnetic impeller. So in the years that we've been running it, we've never once lost an impeller on these March pumps. They're fantastic. To go in, and I'm going to get rid of this one as well. I'm going to pull this one out.
Folks, maybe worth a mention here is that I'm extracting footage from a video that I'm making for my son, which will be a more complete water system overall on the generator. So for the purposes of this video, please look past the editing side. This is sharing stuff more relevant to item changes one can do when removing the raw water pump entirely. Of course, one can simply remove the impeller and keep all else in place, but down the line you may want to simplify things and save on buying expensive water hoses and so forth. Maybe I should share my thoughts here. This fitting is the inlet pipe fitting to which the raw water or seawater enters the generator cocoon or housing at this location. Now inside the cocoon is a complex set of water hoses, kind of like radiator hoses. I want to show them to you in a clip.
Right, busy working into the night here now, and yeah, I've taken out the raw water. Yeah, you can see that is the raw water pipe, which looks okay. It's got a bit of corrosion on it. I'm going to see what I can do with that. Now, I've also removed a very awkward looking radiator pipe. That is quite a fancy raw water pipe. It's like a radiator hose, but it's raw water pipe. And this pipe went, it came in through the side, through this fitting. It attached to that fitting through the cocoon, and basically came underneath the generator and up to the raw water pump here. So my theory is to move the system from here to there. And then my idea is to bring the raw water out through here somewhere, because the cooler basically goes in here, and I can shorten the run by about 2 meters by just bringing the whole system here. I can get rid of this raw water pump, which has the old rubber impeller. I'll get rid of that entirely. I'll get rid of all the raw water hoses within the cocoon, and I'll just have a much simpler system.
Well, I want to dispose of all of this all together along with the raw water pump. I also want to shorten the length of the hose so that the system is more efficient. So I want to move everything across from this side of the generator to the other side of the generator. Now the inlet to the generator will be closer to the inlet of the water through the hull. It's a much closer system. Well, that requires moving the siphon brake across and everything. We shorten the hose and we cut and fit it here. Right, so here we are again. So what I've done is I've brought this water line from the opposite side down here, and I've moved it to this side of the generator because I've figured out that we don't need all of these hoses internally anymore. I'm going to get rid of this unit, so no more hoses in the cocoon, just this one. And so we're going to install a riser on there. It's called a vent actually. It's a rising vent.
You got no place to lay your head. Somebody came and took your bed.
Right, so what this does is it's like an anti-siphon valve. It's a rising vent, and there's a little rubber gasket in here. And what happens is when you stop running your motor, to prevent a siphon effect, the water would drop under weight and this would suck down, suck air in, and basically break that siphoning effect that could happen. So we're going to stick that. It prevents water from getting on top of the pistons through a siphon effect to stop it from continuing to flow through the system. So we're going to have to mount this a little bit higher than the actual mixing elbow, where the water comes into the exhaust. So anywhere there would be fine. When we get an airlock, it's very difficult. One needs to bleed the valve by opening this little one on the top, which normally sits on here. Opening it up, bleeding air through it, getting the water to flow over the top, closing it off again. I don't like that because salt water ends up inside the boat. So what we have done is I've put a T junction into here, put the venturi on the suction valve on top, and then we have a little tap in here, which I fitted, and I'm going to put a pipe on there. So instead of undoing this and getting salt water into the boat, with a tube going out here, I can lead the salt water away from the boat and do the bleeding, get the water flowing that way. I've also put another bleed valve in here. I've put a T junction there, and I've put another valve here which is lower down. And the reason I've done that is sometimes I've found that to get the water to bleed, it's easier sometimes after the U versus on top of the U. So basically I've put a valve on top of the U, that brings water to a point, close it off, open up this valve over here, it just brings it around the corner, and yeah, maybe we've gone a little overboard on this, but this is the way that we like to do it. Right, now another thing that we've done is on our cooler, I've gone ahead and put one of these taps. I like these taps, and I'm going to basically run a tube from here, and this tube will go out of the generator, and in the future when I want to drain my coolant, I literally can flip this little lever over here and the coolant will flow out. So this is a good way to drain the fluid, the coolant. Sometimes to prevent airlocks, it's good to actually pump coolant in an empty system back up, so the air bubbles expel to the top. You actually pump the water back up, into the engine block from the bottom up. Worth mentioning is that these coolers should also be cleaned by a radiator shop or something like that while you've got it out, if it hasn't been done in a while. I'm going to start videoing this man because he's trying to duck and dive away from me. He says he doesn't like videos.
No, we're not a big fan.
So this is the cooler, right? And we've done a bit of a clean and just a little pressure test, and no guarantees on that because one can never guarantee these things, right? I mean, it's impossible.
That's exactly right. It's an old item. It's been cleaned and tested, and that's the best we can do.
But we do our best, and it's all tested nicely and very cool. Thank you, Red Devil. Appreciate it, man.
No problems at all. Glad we could help.
By the way, folks, most generators have a similar access for fittings on the opposite cover, so switching across is easy. It is the boat builders who do not always take these things into consideration.
Right, we're getting there. So I'm going to use this coolant here. This is a type A anti-boil antifreeze, and I have pre-mixed this 50-50. So 50% coolant, 50% water. The stuff is poisonous, you don't want to swallow it. Right, so this is my pump outlet over here. This is my pump for the Onan. It's like an AC type pump. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a T valve on here so that it helps with bleeding the system a lot easier. They're nice and snug.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might wanna sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy. In every life we have some trouble. When you worry, you make it double. Don't worry.
This will just basically go down into the bilge. So now to bleed this, the water will come through here, through this filter, and then the pump generally gets air and airlock in it. So now after the pump I can just bleed it here, and that'll basically make sure that the water gets actually through the pump. And then I've got another 2 bleed screws upstairs. Right, all the air is out. So now I'm going to get rid of this pump entirely. I'm going to get that unit off there so that we don't need it anymore. I'm going to use some gasket material. And thanks to my friend Onan who had this made for me, I'm going to basically use this to blanket off with.
Be happy.
This material that you see here is it's an anti-rust spray that I spray on because there's a Welsh plug here, and I don't want that Welsh plug ever to rust because then you get a leak through the block. So we spray this regularly. It's an etch primer for etching.